Well, I know we're having some serious technical difficulties here, Mark, but so I tried. I don't know if oh, there we go. Hold on. No. Okay, so Mark, I still can't hear you. I can hear myself playing back through your end. Um, but I tried to pull the link up for the video on YouTube, both on my laptop and on my phone, and neither of them the volume was working. And it looks through the comments that other people are having similar issues where they cannot hear you either. So I'm not sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I was reading some of the because, like I said, I tried to play around where I was going to pull the video up like on my phone or in a separate tab so I could hear you that way. And YouTube wasn't working. So at first I thought it was my end, but when it wasn't working on my phone, and then I saw the comments that whatever our issues are, apparently it is something. I thought it was my end, but apparently it is something on your end. Yeah, because it looks like people can hear me, but they cannot hear you. The beauty of doing things live, everybody. All right, so Mark has asked me to just kind of take it away with the analysis here. So while all of you can hear me, I'll jump at it. But yeah, with James Franklin, the as everyone who's watching this knows by now, he was let go earlier today. It's kind of wild to think for Penn State where they were just 3 weeks ago against Oregon. You have a lead in overtime. You're one defensive stop away from beating Oregon, from finally getting that elusive victory over a top five opponent. You may wind up being the number one ranked team in the country if that happened. I mean, heck, in overtime, there was that bad snap that bounced right back to Dante Moore. If it bounces to the line of scrimmage instead, Penn State falls on it. They won't probably they do. They win the game, and who knows where things are at. Instead, here we are 3 weeks later, and James Franklin is unemployed, and the Nittany Lions looking for a new coach. So, from a Penn State perspective, obviously, it's extremely frustrating. It's extremely just it's frustrating. It's bothersome. This is going to go down in history as in program history is one of the most disappointing seasons in school history because of what the expectations were coming into the year. Um, not not just that Penn State, you're sitting here 3-3, but you came into the year ranked number two. You came into the year as a team that everyone had pegged as national championship contender, one of the two or three favorites. You were a team that a lot of people in the media were picking to win it all. Excuse me, 6 games into the season, your head coach is fired. So yeah, it's definitely a major disappointment. And with James Franklin, it's very unfortunate. He is a guy that, by all accounts, is just a really, really good person.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we got you.
Okay, I unplugged my mic. I just can't use my mic, I guess.
Okay.
It's not working.
But
so
hey, we figured it out, I guess.
I love the people in the chat telling me to plug in a mic like I've not done 14,000 videos. Yes, I understand.
Like you don't do this
I'm fully capable of plugging in the mic and making sure the mic selected correctly. Not that I'm infallible, but I have checked those things. Yes. All right, so we'll just go off the computer here. So there we go. Keep going, Marty.
All right, but yeah, no. With James, like I said, part of what makes it, I think, so frustrating for Penn State fans and everything is, again, by all accounts, James Franklin is a really good guy. And, that's not that matters. Obviously, winning football games is a business, but it's easy to root for the people who are easy to root for. He loves Penn State. He loves his players. He's such a great players coach. And a lot of people, I think, myself included, really wanted this to work out. And he was so close so many times to getting them over that hump and never could get them back. Or never could get them over, excuse me. But the one thing they never did was lose to the UCLA's and Northwesterns of the world, right? They always won the games they were supposed to win. Yeah, they didn't always win the games maybe they weren't supposed to, but you were consistently winning 10 games a year. You had the playoff run last year where you were, one series away from going to the national championship game. You thought in the 12-team playoff series, or 12-team playoff setup, excuse me, that you would be primed to make a playoff run and get into the playoff every year, and obviously that wasn't going to happen this year now. So I do think it was the right time. I was on here with you and Matt earlier in the week, coming out of that UCLA loss and discussing some things there, and I said to you guys, I didn't think James Franklin was going to be the head coach in 2026. I didn't think he was going to be fired like this. I thought what would probably wind up happening is they'd kind of slog through the schedule, lose another 2 games or so. And at the end of the year, we'd maybe see a mutual parting of the ways because for all parties involved, that's what was going to be the best interest. Obviously, that's what happened. They come out, they lose to a really bad Northwestern team in a game they should have won. You lose Drew Aller for the year. His Penn State career is now over due to an injury. And this is where you're at now with James Franklin fired. And now if you're Penn State, it's, you want to get your new head coach in there as soon as possible, obviously, because the early signing period begins December 3rd. It's been a really rough day, as you would expect with the coach being fired in the world of Penn State football recruiting. Literally their entire 2027 recruiting class decommitted today. And they've had one 2026 decommit thus far, but you got to imagine there's going to be more coming. So you want to get a coach in there as soon as you can to try and salvage this 2026 class ahead of signing day. And depending on who you target, obviously that can be more challenging than others if it's a sitting Power 4 head coach whose team is trying to make a playoff run or whatever it may be. But, it's going to be a wild few weeks here in Happy Valley. Because one thing I mentioned earlier today over at the Whiteout Report podcast where we did our emergency episode, Dylan and I talked about how Penn State really hasn't had a real, true, genuine coaching search really ever in program history because Joe Paterno was here for so long. When everything happened in 2011, they hired Bill O'Brien because nobody really wanted the job at that point. And then when O'Brien left to the NFL, and you would have thought more of your typical coaching search. Well, I think everybody kind of knew the second Bill O'Brien left, it was going to be either James Franklin or Al Golden, most likely being James Franklin. And within, I think, like 10 days, if that, Franklin was announced as the head coach. So coaching searches aren't something that we see very often in Happy Valley, let alone one that's going to drag on for a couple of months like this one most likely will. But yeah, it was time. It was time more than anything else. And, I think James Franklin's going to land on his feet somewhere and be very successful. And I wish him nothing but the best. But yeah, it was definitely time for a change.
So unfortunately, everyone here missed my awesome soliloquy pontificating off the top about making a comparison between James Franklin and Mark Richt. He was the most successful and most recent firing of this success level that I could think of off the top of my head. And I think most likely there is not another comparison in recent college football history. Les Miles had off the field issues. So Mark Richt would be the guy. 8 out of 15 years in the top 10, didn't have the fortunate setup of being able to even play in a 4-team college football playoff during most of his tenure. Just basically, yes, through his tenure, excluding one season. And so it was a matter of, is this guy a really good coach? And is this guy winning games consistently? Is this guy finishing in the top 10 consistently? Yes, yes, yes to all those things. But are we paying him elite money? Are we paying him to be an elite coach, meaning compete for and at some point in a reasonable period of time, break through and win a championship? And when we say a championship, we mean a national championship. And so we come to the same conclusion as we did with Mark Richt, with James Franklin. Now, the other portion of that is Georgia took a chance. They fired one of the very best coaches in the country, who probably the best team in the country in 2012 and lost by that much to Alabama, and they would have wiped Notre Dame off the field in the BCS championship game. And 2 years later, they're firing him thinking, this is not good enough. We want to go for the gold. And who they hire? Kirby Smart. So they took the chance and they went from like a top 10 coach in the sport to arguably the best coach in the sport. Paul Chryst, Wisconsin. No, they did not achieve to Penn State's level, but not far behind. Paul Chryst was going to Big Ten championship games. Paul Chryst was going 9-3, 10-2 every year. Wisconsin said, you know what? We got these 4 hotshot schools coming in from the West Coast. The recruiting's fallen off. We want to be able to keep up with the Ohio States and the Penn States and the conferences and now the USCs and the Oregons. Fire Paul Chryst. Go for Luke Fickell. He's the hottest guy that we can find on the market. And we see where that's gone. So when you take a risk, you got to be able to make the right decision then to follow it up.
Yeah, and that's where you're at if you're Penn State right now. I like the Richt comparison. That's one that I have made. That's one I've thought about a lot where, there's definitely a lot of similarities between Mark Richt and James Franklin. Where, like you said, Richt was really good. He won a lot of football games at Georgia, won the SEC at Georgia, was the top 10 coach in the country at Georgia, but never could get Georgia over that hump. And Penn State and James Franklin, very similar. Now the difference is, like you said, with Georgia, you had Kirby Smart out there, who I think everybody, kind of knew at the time was probably going to be a star head coach whenever he decided to move on from being defensive coordinator at Alabama. And as a Georgia alum, they were able to bring him in, bring in the prodigal son, and everything's happened there. So if you're Penn State, you don't necessarily have a Kirby Smart out there, but at the same time, I don't think it's impossible for you to make a hire here where it's doesn't improve the program still, right? I think you can get a coach who maybe is an equal coach to James Franklin, and still move the program forward, just because right now I think everybody needed a restart. Everybody needed a fresh start. So that's where it's at. It's a risk. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we've seen it before. Everyone was going to point at Nebraska and Bo Pelini, right? When Bo Pelini was winning 9-10 games a year, they didn't think it was good enough. They moved on, and Nebraska hasn't been the same since then. So you're taking a gamble. You're taking a bit of a risk. But if you're Penn State, I think you're putting a lot of faith in the infrastructure of your program, a lot of the infrastructure that was built thanks to James Franklin, of being a undoubtedly top 10 to 15 job in the country. You have the facilities, you have the donors, you have the backing. Everything's in place at Penn State to be able to be a national championship caliber team. There's 136, I think, FBS programs now. There's probably 115 of them or so that you're never going to win a national championship at. But if that 20 to 25 where you realistically can win a national championship, Penn State's undoubtedly in that group. And that's going to make this job appealing. You look down the road where this coaching cycle is heading. Right now, the jobs that are open, obviously Penn State's by far the best job. I'm assuming Florida and probably Florida State are going to open up as well. So, you're going to have those two as the jobs you're competing with for best job on the market. And I think that's also part of the reason why, if you're Penn State, you look to make this move now, because you can get out in front of other schools in terms of talking to candidates, back channeling, calling agents, gauging interest, all that sort of thing. It just gives you a head start on the competition.
Marty, we got some super chats here. I don't know how much time you have, but if we could go through these super chats.
Much time as we want. I got nothing to do this evening. So,
okay. Two things. Would love to get through these super chats, get your responses to those. And then I also want to go through the ESPN article just to make sure that there are some talking points there that either you may want to speak to, or I may have a question about, or something I may speak to. And so we've got Joe showing up. We read all the super chats. Joe, I appreciate that I was muted. So I don't mean to sound harsh and ornery, everyone. I do appreciate everyone letting me know that the sound wasn't working, and we didn't know exactly why. So anyway, we've got it sorted out now to a certain extent, so you can hear both Marty and I. All right, Adam. Mark, Penn State lost to most top teams over the last 10 plus years, not because of Franklin. It's because they were not as good as those teams. Okay, well, that's a loaded statement. And this year, they were not very good. Penn State is not elite. Okay, if I may, Marty, before you take off on this, unlike the NFL, we can in part give responsibility for the entirety of the program to the head coach. Now, the head coach at said university may not have the resources to compete at that particular school, but at Penn State and in the Big Ten, obviously, there's not a general manager around. Well, there is now with NIL, but meaning a player personnel director that's responsible for the roster. So in the famous words of Bill Parcells, you want me to cook the dinner, but I don't get to shop for the groceries. Well, college football coaches do shop for the groceries. They get the whole deal. So if the players aren't good enough, then you can point to the head coach, because he obviously recruits and signs the players.
Yeah, and like you said, you build your roster in college as the head coach, right? Your coordinators, your position coaches, you hire them. It all falls at your feet. You're the CEO. And I get what Adam's saying. There's definitely been some of those games where they simply were not as talented as teams they lost to. That's I don't disagree with that at all. However, this year, for one, I don't agree with that. This roster on paper should have been a top 3 to 5 roster in the country. And Oregon is a team that they're every bit as good as, in my opinion, if not slightly better than. I mean, not now, obviously, but going into that game before everything that's transpired the last few weeks. And that's a game they should have won. And even if you want to sit here and say, yeah, they lost some games to teams that are more talented than them, which is valid, that doesn't change not just that the loss, but how some of these losses happen. 2017, with 12 minutes to go, you have a 15-point lead in Columbus. You have to close that game out. The following year, you play Ohio State at home. Miles Sanders scores a touchdown to give you a 12-point lead with like 7 minutes to go, and you fumble it away, right? Those are the kind of things that put the feet of coaching. 2019, you go on the road to an undefeated Minnesota team. It was a good Minnesota team. I think we'll all agree that Penn State's better than Minnesota. And you get yourselves in a big hole. You come storming back late. You almost tie the game. You throw an interception in the end zone at the end to lose. If you win that game, the way things shook out that year, 11-1 Penn State, whose only loss was a one-score loss at Ohio State, probably would have got into the 14 playoff. You were better than that Minnesota team. You got to close that one out, right? So a lot of these losses, I still throw at the feet of coaching. Notre Dame last year in the Orange Bowl, you physically dominated them for the first half of football. You pushed them around and should have had a 14, maybe even bigger point lead at halftime. Didn't let them hang around, let them come back into the game. So, yeah, I get the point, Adam. There's definitely some of these games they've lost where they've been the lesser talented team. But there's been games they've lost where they were the more talented team. There's also been games they've lost where even if they were the lesser talented team, that they should have won. You know, in the last 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it was, you have a double-digit lead, or it's a game you've led the whole way through and you make a mistake at the end. And those are the things that I throw at the feet of coaching every time.
I would think at the average season, if Penn State is running at the level that it should be running, and it generally was under James Franklin, actually, that you're going to run into about 1 to 2 games a year where you might be slightly less talented. Maybe Ohio State's a juggernaut. Maybe they've got the most talented team in the country, and you've got the 5th or 6th most talented team in the country. Well, and then maybe somebody else in the Big Ten, Michigan or Oregon's the 5th or 6th best team in the country. You know, and so your coach should be able to overcome that half the time. You know, win those 50-50 games or even 40-60 games. Maybe if you get a really good coach, a legendary coach, he overcomes that talent gap once in a while, like maybe 25% of the time. But then you win the other 8 games of the season are just like, you know, you're going to get upset at some point. Everybody, you know, there's not all the schools, Clemson, Ohio State, whoever you want to name, they've been upset in the last 10 years. So you're going to suffer an upset, but that should happen maybe once every 3 or 4 years where you get upset. So yeah, you're looking for that coach that's going to win more than half of those 50-50 games.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's where the frustration comes in with James Franklin, because as good as he was, I mean, you mentioned you're going to get upset, which up to this year they hadn't. Before they lost to UCLA, they had not lost a Big Ten game to a team other than Ohio State or Michigan since 2021. Like it had been 4 years since that had happened. They had just taken care of business against everybody else. But those 50-50 games, like you said, it was too often, especially when it was Ohio State or Michigan, or even Michigan State for a lot of James Franklin's tenure, where you weren't winning them. And that was the frustration where, you know, you maybe the years when they would play all 3 in the old Big Ten East years, you'd beat Michigan or Michigan State that year, but then lose to Ohio State and lose to the other Michigan school, right? The only year in James Franklin's tenure at Penn State where between the Michigan schools and Ohio State, and I know Michigan State's fallen on hard times in recent years, I'm still going to lump them in there because for the majority of James Franklin's tenure, they're one of the better schools in the Big Ten. 2016, when they won the Big Ten, is the only year of the James Franklin tenure where they won 2 out of 3 against the Michigan schools and against Ohio State when they beat Michigan State and Ohio State, but lost to Michigan. And then that just wasn't going to get the job done to get you to where you wanted to be as a program. So I agree with you, Mark. Those 50-50 games, those toss-up games where it's a team that either you're equal to in talent or, you know, like your comparison, hey, this is the best team in the country, but you're like the 4th best team. You've got to win those games at like a 50% clip. And it wasn't happening. And I think that was leading to a lot of frustration, obviously, because especially after the Oregon game, I think the thought a lot of people had was, man, if they can't beat Oregon, and this is not a knock against Oregon because I think they're a really good football team, obviously, but you're at home, it's the whiteout. It was maybe the most raucous whiteout atmosphere potentially ever. That atmosphere was phenomenal. You're the senior laden veteran team. You're the team that brings everybody back, and you still couldn't get it done. And I think this is something that contributed to the bottom falling out the last few weeks was like, man, that mindset, if we can't get it done now, when are we ever going to do it? Right. And I think a lot of the fans and a lot of the important people in the university probably already felt that way about the big games. And then you throw in what happened against UCLA and Northwestern. And again, that's how we got to where we're at. But yeah, that's something. If you're Penn State, you want to hopefully find your new head coach as someone who, in those 50-50 games, those toss-up games, can win them at a 50% clip or so, which is something that obviously James Franklin could not do.
And the quarterback comparison in that game was kind of rough to take as well, because you got Drew Aller, who's got 3 years of experience. He's playing at home. He's got this wealth of experience versus a Dante Moore that was kind of a wild card coming into this, because I came out of that game and that weekend thinking the biggest statement of this weekend was not necessarily just Oregon. It was Dante Moore showing that, okay, we didn't know what to expect of this guy. We know he's got a wealth of talent, but everything's been easy since he got the job at Oregon. He's been hanging around college football for a few years. He finally gets the job from Dylan Gabriel, and they play a bunch of, 50-point wins, and now he's in a hostile environment. How's he going to respond? And he played better than the incumbent guy with the wealth of experience playing at home.
Yeah, I agree. And that was one where if you came out of the game, I think that was part of the frustration too, where it's like you should have had the quarterback advantage. And again, that's not a knock on Dante Moore, because Dante Moore is really good. He's proven he's very good, right? But that's where you should have had the quarterback advantage. And I think in a way that kind of encompassed everything of the shortcomings and the failures of the James Franklin era was when Drew Aller took over as the guy, the thought was, hey, he's the guy that's going to get us over the hump, right? He's going to be that quarterback. The comparison I've always made, and I preface it with saying I'm talking strictly on the field, all off the field issues aside. For the longest time, Clemson was always Clemson. And then Deshaun Watson came along, and Clemson took that step. In terms, again, just on the field football, a lot of people felt and thought Drew Aller could beat a Penn State with Deshaun Watson was the Clemson. And it never happened. And I think, that's already a bit of a black eye on the coaching staff for not developing him more. But B, I think maybe the biggest black eye, however you want to put it, the best game of his career was the first game of his career against West Virginia. That Saturday night game in primetime on NBC, literally like the second snap from scrimmage, he rolls out, makes this off-balance throw where he just all arm and hits a wide-open Keandre Lambert-Smith, who has like a 75-yard score. And you're just thinking, like, man, here it is. This is what they've been waiting for, a quarterback. I can remember Noah Eagle on the call saying, welcome to the Drew Aller era after that play. And you're just thinking, here it is. They finally have their guy. And that wound up being, unfortunately, the best game of his career was his first start. He wound up going like 24 out of 30 for 300-something yards, I think 4 scores, no interceptions. You come out of that game thinking, man, Penn State finally has that guy. They finally have that elite quarterback to take them to the next level. And it's just, he just seemed to never improve. He just plateaued out. And I think a lot of that, reflects very negatively on the coaching. And in some ways, probably is a big factor as to why we got to where we're at now with James Franklin fired.
So we also have Adam chiming in with this one. And since Marty's a Penn State alum, I hate that. Adam he says this about a number of teams and a number of players, so I don't know why he uses this term in particular. But anyway, here's the super chat. Mark, Penn State has no class. Everyone forgets that Penn State, for decades, has rarely beaten top programs. Okay, we may need to serve Adam with a history lesson under Joe Paterno, excluding like his last few seasons. Anyway, it's a little more complex than that. But anyway, Penn State is very good, but not elite program. Again, are we talking historically? We're talking right now. No, they're not elite right this second. Have they been elite many times? Yes. And the new coach will not change that. So Adam, for whatever reason that is, yet to be explained in 2 super chats, does not see Penn State as an elite program, and that there's something inherently there that is in the way of them becoming elite. But they have been elite. You take Penn State circa like late 60s to mid 2000s, 2005, 08, really through the end of Paterno's era, excluding the last couple of years that were just okay. They were elite almost that entire time.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at the last 4 years for Joe Paterno, 2008, they go 11-1, win the Big Ten, and were a last-second field goal by a backup kicker at Kinnick Stadium away from playing for a national championship. 2009, they finished 10-2, ranked in the top 10, went to the Citrus Bowl and beat LSU. And then his last 2 years of 2010 and 2011, 2010 was a 6-6 year. I'll give you that. That wasn't good. But 2011, when everything happened with the scandal and Joe was fired, they were ranked like 8th in the country and sitting like 7-1. Like they seemed to be well on their way to playing in the inaugural Big Ten championship game that season until everything happened and Joe Paterno got fired. So, I mean, even with that, right up to the end of the Paterno era, they were still cranky. Like I said, two of his last 4 seasons, they won double-digit games, which included a Big Ten title. And had it not been for the scandal that led to him being fired before the 2011 season was concluded, they would have had a 10-win season that year too, because they still went 9-3. And one of those losses was a loss against Nebraska in the first game after everything had happened, where, it's forever ago, has nothing to do with this really. But if the coaching staff isn't fired and they're not scrambling, trying to figure out a game plan for that week, probably win that game and you probably win 10 games still. So, yeah, it's a program that, like you said, Mark, are the elite right this very second? No, but really ever since Joe Paterno got things humming in the 60s, outside of some gaps like early 2000s, there was 4 out of 5 years they were under 500, and there's been some other times, but for the most part, they've all consistently been one of the 10 best programs in the country for the better part of 50, 60 years now. So I think that, and again, if you weren't that, you're not moving on from James Franklin, right? Because James Franklin, if he wants to be a head coach in college football next year, he will be. There are a lot of schools that would fire their coach to hire him. But when you are what you view as a top 10 to 12 program in the country, like Penn State is, you have higher expectations. You want to take that next step. And that's where you make these hard choices, like Georgia did with Mark Richt, like we said earlier, to get a coach in here that hopefully takes you to that next step.
Daniel, appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. After OU last chip, how is Franklin worse than Stoops as OU fan?
Well, I mean, Bob Stoops has a national championship and James Franklin doesn't.
I think that's what he's saying. After Oklahoma won the national championship, which it was 2000, Bob Stoops' second season, how is Franklin worse than Stoops? Basically, make a comparison. Well, my comparison would be Stoops didn't have to deal with Ohio State, and Stoops won the Big 12 over and over and over and over and over. So after his first national championship, he ran his team to BCS championship games, and they largely got embarrassed, of course, 2003, 2004, 2008. I would put Stoops slightly above Franklin because he was winning conference championships and going to BCS championship games.
Yeah, I agree. But I mean, I think like you said, the important thing is Stoops was at the program that was the program in his conference, right? Oklahoma, for the better part of the Big 8/Big 12's life, when the Sooners were in the conference, they dominated it. Even with Texas there, after Texas joined the Big 12, they still largely dominated that conference. I think that's where the bit of the caveat is that, that Bob Stoops was at the program in the Big 12.
Adam, appreciate you coming back with this one. Mark, I said last year that soon-to-be elite coach Jimmy Rogers should be hired. You refused. I don't recall this discussion, but anyway, that was the right move. Okay. Jimmy Rogers of Washington State. Okay.
Well, my question was going to be, who is Jimmy Rogers? I'm not going to lie.
Jimmy Rogers, Washington State. Yeah, I don't know where we're going with that.
I thought maybe that Jimmy Rogers was supposed to be some sort of strange love child between you and James Franklin. James Franklin, Mark Rogers, we put them together. What do we get? We get Jimmy Rogers.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's there. That's an interesting twist on that, but it works. Adam coming back for this one. Mark, for the last 3 decades, Penn State has been the bridesmaids, not the brides.
I mean, I get it to an extent, but part of it was the setup, right? The BCS championship era, and then before, like 1994, I'll forever die on the hill that Penn State was the best team in the country. They should have been the national champions, and the AP voters wanted to give Tom Osborne his lifetime achievement award, essentially, to make sure he got one in Nebraska. And then you look at some of those years, 2005, when Penn State only loss was a 1-point loss to Michigan, where the Wolverines scored in the last play of the game, and they finished the year ranked number 3 in the country. If there's a 14 playoff that year instead of the BCS model, they're in. That 2008 team I mentioned, if there's a 14 playoff instead of the BCS model, they would have been in. And that 2008 team, I think, could have won it all because I think they matched up really well with both Florida and Oklahoma that year. So to an extent, I get what you're saying, but some of that's things that were out of their control. Right? Again, 1994, they should have been national champions. 2005 and 2008 were years that, in the current setup or even in the 4-team setup, I think they definitely would have made the playoff and they would have had a legitimate shot to win it all. And even that, you say they've been the bridesmaid, not the bride. If you go, I'll go back even further than the last 3 decades. If you go back to the end of World War II, there's literally been and Mark, you would know this as well, I think 25 programs that have won a national championship since World War II, right? It's a lot of the haves, not many of the have-nots. And as you progress through the decades, once you hit whatever year it was with the split title with Georgia Tech and Colorado, 91, 92, somewhere in there, since then, it's literally been 10 programs that have won a national title, right? It's very much the haves and the have-nots. And while Penn State hasn't won a national championship since 86, I would still argue that they're much more amongst the haves than the have-nots in college football.
Well, for what it's worth, Marty, you will be happy that our official Voice of College Football National Championship records has Penn State as a co-national champion in 1994 with Nebraska.
Good, because they should have been. They were the best team in the country that year. I don't care what anybody says. I will forever die on that hill.
I'm not even dying on a hill to say I'm going to make a differentiation between the two programs and tell you which team was better and had they played, who's going to win. I'm just taking it strictly from a resume look, and what is right and fair is that you had 2 teams in 2 completely different conferences who play high-level football against great schedules, and they went to their respective bowl games, and they both cleaned the clock across the board and won in dominant fashion across the board. So they did not get the opportunity to play. Therefore, the right and just thing to do is the same thing that was done in 1997 and in other times, and they each should have a national championship. That's just the fair way to approach it.
No, I agree, especially, before they had the BCS start in 98, that was the way to do it. And like you said, it's not like it was unheard of. 97 happened. We just said about the Colorado Georgia Tech year in 90, 91, whenever that was. Like that's how it should have been done. But I've always been of the opinion that was AP voters trying to give Tom Osborne his lifetime achievement award for having been in Nebraska for so long and not having one yet. But I digress.
And that could be the case. All right, because Michigan fans make the same claim since he was retiring in 1997. Okay, Let's go through this business here. Let's clear the deck. And we'll see if there's any notes that need to be cleaned up here concerning this situation. It's almost impossible to find these things to get them off the screen. Goodness gracious. Let's do this. All right. So basically, I read this off the top to no one. So Penn's, Franklin's out after 12 seasons. Franklin's owed $49 million. Second largest buyout since Jimbo Fisher, $76 million. Associate head coach Terry Smith. What do we know about him?
Yeah, last night on our post-game episode of the White Out Report podcast, we agreed it'd probably be Terry Smith. Terry's a former Letterman, was a starting receiver at Penn State in the 90s. Is the only remaining member, which I should say only, he's 12 years now, but the one remaining member from James Franklin's original staff at Penn State. Very well respected in Penn State circles, very well respected in the state of Pennsylvania in football circles. Before going into coaching at college. He coached a couple years at Temple before coming to Penn State to be cornerback coach. He was one of the most successful high school coaches in the history of Pennsylvania high school football. So I figured it'd be Terry. I think part of it is he's a guy that is so heavily involved with them recruiting wise that you put him in charge to try and do the best you can to hold this 26 class together until you get a new coach. Also, I'm assuming whoever the new coach is, Terry Smith's going to have every opportunity in the world to be retained and remain on the staff if he wants it. So going to Terry Smith as the interim was definitely the right move.
All right. Elsewhere here, we've got, we know what's happened in recent weeks. Obviously, the losses to UCLA and Northwestern, 2 losses. Penn State became the first team since the FBS and FCS split in 78 to lose consecutive games as a 20 or more point favorite. A lot of penalties. Drew Aller. Let's touch on that. So regardless of what the evaluation of Drew Aller's play and how he failed to meet expectations and so forth, you got to feel for the guy. And it was sad to see him leave the field in the fourth quarter of that game, knowing that his college career's over. And a lot of people would argue, oh, he's going to make a ton of money. And he will, regardless of how he deals with NFL defenses and how he transitions to the next level. He's got just way too much talent. He will be at least on a roster in the NFL for years. So yeah, again, it's sad to see, knowing that as far as I know, you know so much more about his own personal story and his work at Penn State, but he seems to be an upstanding guy that worked hard and led the team and did his best to win championships.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I mean, obviously things have not gone as a lot of people, Drew himself, had hoped, but it was gut-wrenching to watch because he is a kid who has just completely thrown himself at this university, at this football program. Earlier in the week, he was doing a media briefing where he mentioned to the media he spends, in his words, 95% of his free time is spent in the Lash football building, watching film, working out, whatever it may be. You can never question the heart, the desire, the want to win, all of that from Drew Aller. And that's why these things were always so hard on him. You go back to the Orange Bowl last year and him on the sidelines where the cameras caught him just bawling his eyes out after that interception. I think the world of Drew Aller. As you said, he's just an upstanding citizen, a great young guy. He's got to make a lot of money in the NFL. He's got all kinds of tools. I understand his college career didn't go the way anyone had hoped and didn't, or the way it looked like it was going to go after that first game 3 years ago. But yeah, he threw his everything, his entire heart and soul into this football program, into trying to get Penn State over the hump. And that's the kind of thing that makes this stuff with Drew, with the injury, this makes it even more gut-wrenching than it would have been otherwise.
Let's go back into the history books here real quick. I just want to clear something up because Adam, of all people, and we love Adam, so Adam does a great job. Adam hosts our Rutgers show, and he comes on here and argues with me all the time or presents cases and has great respect for what I do, and I respect Adam. But Adam, you of all people who constantly challenge the establishment or the history books when they are determined by somebody else and not determined by play on the field, you of all people should respect us trying to right wrongs or bring a non-biased, neutral approach to championships. That we're not talking about Super Bowl championships. We're not talking about a structured system in a professional sport where the results were everything, and you really can't argue the outcome of any of it unless some official somewhere made a bad call. No, we were talking about Joe Paterno fielding undefeated football teams that did not get voted the national champion. We understand we're talking about the large percentage of the history of this sport being voted on by competent and incompetent people. So we are merely trying to point out where Penn State may have been ripped off, just like other schools have at various times throughout history, and where their accomplishments on the field warranted more recognition in terms of a national championship or a shot at a national championship. That's all we're saying. And again, Adam, based on our conversations, I would think that you would be applauding us for doing that, for challenging the record books. All right. You want to take a few calls here, Marty?
Yeah, absolutely.
We got Rob stopping by, Notre Dame fan. Rob, good to hear from you. What's going on?
Hey, guys. Yeah, how you guys doing?
Good. What's up?
Hey. Yeah, so I just was talking to people in chat earlier, and there was some sentiment that maybe Curt Cignetti would get the job at Penn State. And as weird as it is to say, that's not necessarily an upgrade right now. And yes, Penn State is historically a million times better than Indiana. It's not even remotely close, right? But if we're just looking at the last couple of years, and the fact that the Indiana donors have kind of woken up because they finally got a coach that's worth a darn. I mean, Mark Cuban alone, and I said this in the chat, I mean, if he wants to keep Cignetti in Indiana, the finances are there. Like if Indiana wants to keep Cignetti, he doesn't have to go anywhere. In fact, I personally think that Cignetti is one of those types of guys that, kind of macho guy, wants to prove his worth. I think he wants to stay with Indiana and see what he can build there. That's just my feelings on it. And I think there's going to be a lot of money rolling into Indiana. I mean, I think we're looking at the rise of potentially a new power in the Big Ten. And I'm not just saying that because I'm from Indiana. I mean, I don't have any rooting interest in Indiana. I'm a Notre Dame fan. But I do see them as Cignetti's there and they keep, recruiting well and using the transfer portal and getting the funds to roll in. That could be the start of a new Big Ten power potentially. So I don't really see him moving to Penn State. Would it shock me? No, it wouldn't shock me because Penn State is still one of the probably top 10, jobs in the country, maybe top 15, something like that. Potentially give, plus or minus, but certainly one of the best jobs in the country. So he could do it, but I don't see that happening. What are you guys' thoughts on? I mean, yeah, his cold dead carcass, so to speak, is, he hasn't had a chance to move on. But what do you guys think? As far as the next coach, who do you think would be a fit? And do you think Cignetti would be wooed or do you think he'd want to go to Penn State?
Yeah, I've heard people say similar things today where right now you can argue Indiana's a better job than Penn State. I'm still not going to make that argument. I mean, right now Indiana obviously is a better football team. When they play Penn State in a couple of weeks, I don't expect that to go well for Penn State whatsoever. But that said, it's Indiana. And I get what you're saying with the donors and that, because that's very important. That is very, very important. But I still think for long-term success, you're going to be set up better at Penn State than Indiana. I'm sure Cignetti's going to get a call. Every big job that opens up this offseason is going to gauge the interest in Cignetti. I will say that some of the things I've gathered just from talking to people with Cignetti, he is a Pittsburgh guy. So he's from Pennsylvania. So a lot of ties to the area. I think personally, if Cignetti leaves Indiana, it's for the SEC. I don't think he would leave for another Big Ten school. But I do think it would be a tremendous hire if you could make it happen as Penn State. And I think Penn State's going to reach out. And I'm sure Cignetti's going to, reciprocate that interest because if nothing else, it's going to make him more money somewhere. But I personally think that if Cignetti leaves Indiana this cycle, he's going to do it to head south.
So a lot of people are assuming that Indiana's arrived as a football power and it's going to be able to maintain this. I'm not saying that they won't. I'm just saying it's not proven. If Curt Cignetti chooses to go to Penn State and they want Curt Cignetti, then he knows that he has arrived at a football power and he knows what resources he has. He knows what's been accomplished there and that he can have the opportunity to continue that. We have seen Indiana. Think about this. What happened on Saturday was hugely impressive. Hugely impressive. Absolutely. And even what happened last season for it being Indiana was impressive. And what they did against Illinois, impressive. But really, Indiana has beaten one really good football team. They did that on Saturday. That's the first team that they have beaten who was anywhere close to a top 15 team in the country. So
Oh yeah,
I'm not
don't.
saying this can't happen going forward. I'm just saying there's very little evidence. And again, we've got a lot of knee-jerk reactions to what results mean long-term. This may be the beginning of something, completely new. And I don't know when the last time a powerhouse emerged from nothing. Clemson would be the closest thing, and they were really good. They were like top 15 or 20 good all time before Dabo Swinney. So that was lifting really good, 8-4 good to 12-0 good and winning national championships. This would be almost unprecedented if you maintain this kind of level.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Indiana is going to be a power, but I'm saying that I could definitely see that happen if things keep going the way they're going.
Because things keep going the way they are, they will.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the progress that they've made in just 2 years, and like I said, the main thing for me that points in that direction is the donors. I mean, Indiana has a massive donor base, alumni, and like Mark Cuban just put a massive check in for the organization. There's going to be a lot of changes coming for that program soon, but yeah, I can see Cignetti going there, but I don't know, man. I would say this to Penn State fans, and I know Marty, you're probably well. What was your? Let me ask you this real quick before I say my next thing. What was your opinion on Franklin? Were you in the camp of like we got to fire him now, or were you kind of like, let's hold on and see?
The last 2 weeks had swung me to the you got to make a move now camp. I've always been a huge Franklin guy. I've always said that if you move on from James Franklin, there's no guarantee you're going to get a better coach, and I still stand by that because I still think James Franklin's a great coach. But it's not even just that they've lost the last 2 weeks; it's how it's happened, body language of the team, some of the other reports, some of the other some of the things that kind of funneled out and smoking out of what's going on behind closed doors. You needed to make a move because you were going to risk really losing this thing and letting this spiral into potentially becoming a more of a long-term issue than a one-season issue. I've always loved James Franklin. I think overall that Penn State fans should view his tenure positively because he did a lot of good here, especially with resources and facilities and getting a lot of that modernized. But I was in the camp after the UCLA game, especially after yesterday. It was time. It was time to make a move.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's funny because as a Notre Dame fan, I felt kind of similar with Brian Kelly. Like I appreciated all the things he did for the program and kind of brought them back into relevancy because they were in the dark period there for a while. I didn't like the way it ended, and I'm sure you're probably in the same boat for Franklin. But yeah, I mean, I would just say to Penn State fans, like, be careful what you wish for, because like, yeah, I know you had to fire Franklin. I mean, he lost the team, in my opinion. It felt like that team.
That was my biggest thing too. I completely agree.
Yeah, it just and like you said, the body language. He looked shell shocked after that loss. To Northwestern, he just looked like his soul left his body. So you kind of had to make that change. But I just hope for Penn State that they find the right guy. It's just because that is a program. Whatever people say in the chat or whatever. I mean, Penn State is one of the best teams in the Big Ten. They're one of the best teams in the nation because of that, and they should be a national power year in and year. I think college football is better when the big brands like that are able to compete and be, relevant. So I hope they hit a home run, to be honest. But I don't know, man. It's going to be a tough coaching search because, like I said, I don't really see Cignetti going to Penn State. But yeah, we'll have to see. Anyways, I'll get off and let you guys take some more calls. But always good talking to you, Mark and Marty.
A lot, Rob. Appreciate you being here. I'm going to say one thing about reading body language, and everybody probably on this chat is much better at this than I am because I'm bad at it. I refuse to do it. I do it very rarely. So I'm not discounting what Rob just said. So I hope, I'm sure Rob's hearing this. I'm not discounting this in any way. But I know a lot of people after Ryan Day and Ohio State lost to Michigan said, look at Ryan Day. He's shell-shocked. He's got this glaze over his eyes. He's watching this flag planting at midfield. He'll never recover. He's done. And they were throwing dirt on his grave. And we saw he got the opportunity to play 4 more games against 4 of the best teams in the country, and he wiped them all out. So things can change. Now, we're not going to see James Franklin get that opportunity, but it would be great in all these type situations to be able to run alternate universes at the same time and say, James Franklin stays at Penn State. Can he recover from this? And what's it going to look like in the next 3 years versus James Franklin's out the door, and what's Penn State going to do, and who are they going to hire? But of course, we don't get that luxury. I do want to address this really quick. So, Marty, you know much better than I do what Penn State looked like in the aftermath of the Sandusky scandal. And I was one that was here saying, oh, man, how is this program going to recover? They will recover, but it's going to be like 8 or 10 years from now because they're losing all their players. They got this stigma. So if you're a good football player, why are you signing with Penn State? You can't play in a bowl game the next 2 years. And, well, I think it was like 4 years to start.
It was originally supposed to be 4, yeah. I wanted to be short. It got shortened to 2, but
how are they going to sign any players above like 3-star athletes for the next several years? So they're toast for 5 years minimum. Well, were they? No, they recovered rather quickly. So this is a bit extreme.
This is very extreme.
They have a great football program. They are firing a really good football coach. They will be able to replace him with a really, really good football coach.
Yeah. I go back to Jay Sider, the former running back coach who left after last season to become a running backs coach at Notre Dame. He used to say this about Penn State, and it's true. He goes, how many schools in the country are people pissed off about going 10-2 every year, right? And that's where Penn State's at. That's part of the reason why this move was made. So, I mean, yeah, you're going to lose. I mentioned earlier in the show, the entire 2027 recruiting class is decommitted. But those kids are so far away from signing with anybody. There's no reason the new coach can't come in. Obviously, those kids are interested in Penn State for a reason. A lot of them are in-state kids who, if I was coaching Penn State, would be interested just because it's a state school, right? So they're going to have a chance to get those kids back in the fold. The 2026 class, they're going to lose some kids. It's going to happen. But at the same time, when you hire your new coach, they're going to bring some guys with them. And then especially in today's world with the transfer portal, yeah, they may lose a lot of guys to the portal. But again, the new coach is going to come in and bring people with them as well. It's never been easier to be successful in your first year as a head coach at the collegiate level than it is now because of the transfer portal. So I have no doubt. The 2026 next year, yeah, they may take some lumps, and that was probably they could have won a national championship this year, and next year was going to be a bit of a down year because of everything they lose. But this isn't going to be some 5 to 7 year extravagant rebuild that needs to be done. This isn't like the Houston Astros of the 2010s or something like that.
We got Adam stopping by. So, Adam, thank you so much for all your super chat contributions. And I'm sure Adam heard everything that I had to say following up his comments. So, Adam, take it away.
Mark, thanks for having me on the show. Marty, it's nice to meet you, and I appreciate your commentary.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, okay, so the point I was trying to make about Penn State, and I'll be quick, it's not that they're not a good program. They're a very, very good program, but I don't believe that they're an elite program, and I don't put the blame on James Franklin. Now, let's look at the last 30 years. If you go from 1995 to the present, I'll be quick. 9-3, 11-2, 9-3, 9-3, 10-3, 5-7, 5-6, 9-4, 3-9, 4-7, 11-1, 9-4, 9-4, 11-2, 11-2, 7-6, 9-4, 8-4, 7-5, 7-6, 7-6, 11-2, 11-2, 9-4, 11-2, 4-5, 7-6, 7-6, 11-2, 10-3, and 13-3.
Adam, Marty and I both could have probably come up with those records by ourselves. You didn't need to look those up, but we do appreciate it. Thank you. Yes,
Mark, your violent attacks on me tonight are obvious and unacceptable. I'm just joking. So when you look at Penn State's all-time record against Ohio State, it's 14-24. When you look at their all-time record against Michigan, 10-17. Now, has Penn State had elite years? Of course they did, in the 80s, especially under Paterno. So what I'm trying to say is, they're an A- team, not an A team. So understand my point is a narrow one. They're very, very good, but I just don't think they're elite. And I think that looking to Franklin as the problem, although certainly he was in some respects, this is the broader point that for the last 30 years, Penn State's kind of been close, but no cigar. Kind of like bridesmaids, but not brides.
Can I just clarify one thing, and I'll let Marty respond?
Of
When
course.
you talk about Penn State being a program, I think we need to clarify, are we talking about the Penn State football program right this second? Are we talking about historically, like historically since 1890 or historically even since 1970? I think it's important to, the Georgia elite status football program is today. It's not all time. Georgia's
Right.
a really, really, really good football program all time, but they're not like elite Notre Dame, Ohio State. So
Right.
things change. So
Yeah,
where are we on this argument here? Let's clarify that first.
I'll clarify it in two ways. When I made that comment in the chat, I said the last 3 decades they haven't been elite.
Okay.
That's why I read off those statistics. Now, historically, there are 946 wins and out of 946 and wins out of 1,360 games. They have a 70% win percentage historically. But when I'm looking and making the point about whether they're elite, I am looking towards the last few decades. So I'm trying to balance it between history and now to kind of have some balance. And that's why I went from 95 and forward. So I like Penn State. I want to see them do well. I'm from New Jersey. We have a lot of people here go to Penn State, and we want them to be elite. But I just don't think in the last 3 decades they've been in that elite category. They've been close, but not quite there. So Marty, where am I going wrong here?
So I'm sorry, Marty. Give me one more comment to throw in here, because I just want to clarify something. Because again, when you start reading like everybody's record year after year after year after year, like people in the chat are waiting to hear, okay, elite, I better be hearing 11-1, 10-2, 11-1, 11-1. Do you know how many programs we could read off that would sound like that just year after year after year? Pretty much 2. If you would read Iowa State over the last 30 years, you'd hear that. And Alabama post Saban, you would hear those kind of records. Other than that, it's hard to find any. Read off Oklahoma, read off Texas, read off Georgia, read off Clemson, and you'll get those dips with everyone. So while Penn State may not sound elite over the last 3 decades, it's hard to find those programs that are clearly. Now, you can find a lot on the same level, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, etc. But to find programs that have definitely exceeded them in the last 3 decades, I think it's 2 that have definitely exceeded them over the last 3 decades.
Yeah, right. And those are the elite programs.
There's only 2 elite programs in the sport?
There's only 2 people that occupy that rarefied stratosphere. I mean, from 1995.
That's fine. If that's your criteria, I'm just clarifying that there's only 2 elite programs.
Well, so let me ask you both. From 1995, and I will give you complete discretion on this. From 95 to 2005, how many of those years would you say Penn State was a legitimate national champion?
From 95 to 2005?
I'm assuming you're going to say, you know what, let's include 94, because I don't.
Okay.
I think that's. I don't want to seem like I'm being biased. So let's say 94 is 1. Would you say that, 05? I'm not sure.
Yeah, 05, yeah. I think they were pretty solidly the 3rd best team in the country that year behind USC and Texas, in my opinion. I would definitely throw 05 in there.
All right, so 2 out of the last 30 years, you would consider.
Well, I don't think it's just those 2, though. I think – I know the season didn't – 96, 97, 99, in my opinion, they were national title level teams, various things. 97, there were some injuries that derailed some things. 1999, they were 8-0 and ranked number 1 in the country and lost their last 3 games. That started with just that heartbreaking loss to Minnesota on a last-second field goal. So I think it's – and again, that's where it's different too, because, as someone who has grown up, I've spent my entire life rooting for, covering Penn State, you're going to have more context in some of those seasons than just looking at that record, right? So I think that's part of it as well. But I would say that 97 and 99, they were, or 96, 97 and 99, they were, those years, they were legitimate national title level team. It's just for one reason or another, things didn't pan out for them.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, they had 3 losses those years, but maybe other teams did too. So I don't want to demean your point, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is this. I'm trying to capture the intangibles here. Like last year when Penn State lost to Ohio State in Happy Valley, it wasn't because Penn State played so bad. It was because Ohio State was the better team. When Oregon beat them in the whiteout this year, Oregon was the better team. And I don't think there's any shame in saying that. It's like I sometimes think Penn State and their administration have these expectations like, oh, we want to be competing for national championships every year. But I just don't think they're on that level, at least not yet. Maybe they were historically, but I think the expectations need to be tampered down just a bit.
No, and I think that's fair. And I agree. Last year they lost to Ohio State mostly because Ohio State was a better team. I also would argue that their offensive game plan for that game was complete hot garbage. With 5 minutes to go, you have first and goal at the 1 yard line, down by 7, and tried to run the same play 3 straight times to have it fail, and then throw the ball on 4th and goal instead of trying to throw earlier in the. But I agree with you. Like the last 30 years, I wouldn't say they've been an elite program. They've been a great program the last 30 years, right? I don't think there's any denying that. I think historically they're an elite program. I think historically they're one of the 10 best programs in the history of college football. And again, I said earlier in the show, because I don't disagree with most of what you're saying. I totally get your point, especially from a non-Penn State perspective. But if you want to get this program over that hump, you have to take a risk. And I think they're taking the risk here. And, one thing with college sports, I think this applies to every sport, but especially in college sports where it's so important for boosters and people of that nature to keep them invested, you have to sell hope sometimes. And right now, there's no more. There was no more selling hope on James Franklin at Penn State. You were never going to be able to sell another Penn State fan, booster, alum, whatever it is, on James Franklin being able to win a national championship here. On James Franklin, I don't even know if you're going to sell them on James Franklin getting them back to where they were last year at this point. So sometimes you have to make that coaching change solely to sell some hope for that new coach bump. Even if you don't necessarily believe you're going to hire a coach who is a slam dunk improvement over the guy you're firing, you've got to be able to sell that hope. And I think that has as much to do with this as anything as well.
Well, I think you make a great point, and I agree with you. And the last thing I'll say is I think Franklin's biggest flaw was that he misjudged some of his talent. Now, I wish Drew Aller a very, very quick and full recovery, and I do wish him the best of success as he moves forward, possibly into the NFL. But he was not the man for Penn State. He had the raw talent, but his intangibles I didn't think were there, and you saw that even yesterday with that interception against Northwestern. So I think that was his shortcoming. I do think parting ways with Franklin was probably the right decision, but I also think Penn State, as the expectations should be really, really high, but they need to be tempered just a bit until they get better players. And that's my only point. So, Marty, nice to meet you again. Thanks for the discussion. And Mark, as always, thank you so much for having me on your great show.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks,
Adam hosts the Rutgers Show with Gabe every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Rutgers channel, folks.
Thank you.
All right. Let's keep it rolling. And again, Marty, just let me know at whatever point you need to jump off here. We got Michigan Man stopping by.
I got a good 30 minutes. I'm gonna take the call. I'm gonna pop over the fridge. It's 2 feet to my left and grab a bottle of water, so I'll hear it. But
awesome. Michigan Man, what's going on?
There's one point. How's it going? I would like to counter something that was said before. He brought up, Penn State losing to Oregon, and Oregon just being the better team, and he's bringing up talent and things like this. They have the talent. I don't think it's necessarily a talent issue. Do you think Indiana has as much talent as Oregon?
I don't. No.
Do you think Indiana has as much talent as Penn State?
It is a little bit more difficult to evaluate these rosters because of the transfer portal, because we used to just look at recruiting rankings, and for all the people that have issues with recruiting rankings in mass, they're very accurate. And we could just compare and say, well, Penn State's 4 classes the last 4 years were number 7, 9, 12, and 5. That's who they are. Ohio State's were 2, 4, 6, and 2, whatever. And that would be pretty accurate to the level of talent on that roster. But now with transfer portal, a lot of these guys were lowly recruited, but they turned out to be really good G5 players or elsewhere, and they're really good players, and they outplayed their recruiting rankings. So, and I know that there's a ranking for that, but I think it's not the best. I think these guys are doing the best they can to try to compile these talent rankings that also include the transfer portal, but it's kind of tough to rate a guard coming in from Louisiana Monroe, who may actually turn out to be a really good player, and addition to the roster. So that's
yeah. So yeah, to me, look, I think they're clearly more talented than Indiana, and that's just my personal opinion. I think they're clearly more talented. I just think Curt Cignetti gets the absolute every ounce of juice out of his players. Every ounce of juice you could squeeze out of your players, he gets that out of them. And the point I'm bringing up there is I don't think you could just point to talent. I do think James Franklin has fumbled the ball when it comes to some of the development and some of his choices when it comes to coordinators. And we could go down the list of these, especially clearly he had an issue when it came to decision-making in big-time games. Now, unfortunately, that seemed to have bled into this year uniquely into games against opponents he has no business losing to. So I just disagree with that. I think if you're an aspiring coach or you're a coach that hasn't had a chance at a big time program, Penn State is a very appealing job. I think the right coach can take Penn State to a quote unquote elite level. I think that they have all the resources, they have all the talent, they recruit well. I think the right coach can make that happen. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one thing I want to touch on, you mentioned, because Adam said something that made me think of it as well, with the coordinators and with the talent evaluation and that sort of thing. I think for the most part, Penn State has done a tremendous job of developing their guys. One thing that James Franklin has done a really good job of, or did a really good job of, I guess I should say now, was in recruiting, identifying guys early, getting in that recruitment early before they kind of exploded. Drew Aller was an example of that. When he committed to Penn State, he was barely a 3-star prospect. But when it came to development, the biggest thing is, and I think this ties in the coordinator, was a quarterback. Drew Aller was recruited by Mike Yurcich to play in Mike Yurcich's pro-style, more air-raidy kind of offense. You bring in Andy Koldernicki, which I loved the hire at the time. I remember when Yurcich was fired, I immediately texted a buddy of mine and said, I forget the guy's name, but they need to go hire the coordinator from Kansas. But Koldernicki's offense needs a dual-threat quarterback to truly be effective. And for 2 years, we've said it were Drew Aller and Koldernicki's offense trying to square peg into a round hole. And I think what we're getting at is you have to pick one of the two lanes. And I think they tried to have both, where you went and got Aller, which I understood. 247 Sports had him as the number one player in the country his senior year in high school. If that kid wants to come to your school, you're not telling him no. But they needed to do more to build the offense around his strong suits. And after Mike Yurcich was fired, they go and bring in an offensive coordinator who runs an offense that does not fit his strong suits whatsoever. So I think that's one area that, when you look back on these last couple of years here, the James Franklin tenure, that proved to be very problematic and probably played a big role in costing him his job, was not having offensive coordinator and your 5-star quarterback be on the same page in terms of what's best for that quarterback and how he fits the offense.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's part of the reason why they have so many issues on offense is you recruited players to fit a certain style system, but then you get a coordinator that doesn't run that style system, but then you try to force those players to play in your new coordinator style system. And the best coaches, what they do is they fit the system to their players' strengths. That's what you should do. And you should know it's a problem when you're trying to run Aller like he's some dual threat. They've been doing that all year, trying to run him like he's some dual threat quarterback. He's not a dual threat quarterback. He could, don't get me wrong, he could evade the pocket kind of like a Ben Roethlisberger maybe, but he's not someone you should rely on his legs to do things. If the play breaks down, sure. But yeah, I totally agree. In terms of potential coaching hires, don't go after Curt Cignetti. That's our guy. I want him to come to Michigan, so please don't offer him anything because we have a coach. I have a coach that I don't like either as a head coach. Well, actually, you probably like James Franklin. I don't like Sharon. So, but what about Urban Meyer?
You know, it's funny because when he said don't go after him, he's our guy. My rebuttal to you was going to be, well, the first guy I went on the call is a guy that you're probably not very fond of, and that's him. There is definitely some smoke out there from reputable people who are much more connected to the Penn State program and know more than I do, and from talking to some people I know are connected. I fully expect him to at least give Urban a phone call and see if he's interested. I mean, I get where all the pushback would be on Urban Meyer. However, if Urban Meyer is interested and he's fully committed and bought in to doing this, why wouldn't you try it?
I think he'd be perfect, man.
I do too.
I think
and
he'd be
also,
perfect.
With Urban Meyer, I think one thing that's a factor here, when he took the Ohio State job in ahead of the 2012 season, throughout that year in 2011, and I've heard this from enough people who would have known to fully believe it, and a lot of other people have said the same things from hearing from the right people. He was the guy who was going at the end of the 2011 season. The original plan was for Joe Paterno to retire, and Urban Meyer was going to be the guy to replace him. I had a friend in high school whose dad used to be on the board of trustees at Penn State, that according to him, and similar people who have no connections to this man have said they've heard this same thing from other people. There was a BOT meeting kind of behind closed doors. They all had agreed on it. That's what was going to happen. And then the Sandusky scandal happened. Ohio State opened up and Urban Meyer went up in Columbus. So I definitely think there at one point in time, there was definite interest from Urban Meyer in Penn State. And I think that could be a tremendous match.
Well,
I think if you're Penn State, you can go into it with, hey, yeah, Urban's a little bit older. Was he not 61, 62, whatever it is? But looking at like a 5 to 7 year plan where then, hey, towards the back end of that, similar to what you did with Ryan Day, start prepping your replacement even. But I mean, if I'm Pat Kraft, the athletic director, Urban Meyer's first phone call I make, I'm making Urban Meyer tell me no before I pivot to anyone else.
Yeah, no, for sure. One thing I would push back real quick, the only reason I don't think he would ever have considered Penn State in 2011 is because if you remember, he wasn't even going to take the Ohio State job if they got a bowl ban, and that's been confirmed.
That's what I'm saying. It wasn't. Once everything happened with Sandusky, that's when everything fell apart with him in Penn State. All of this was.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
Before all of that came to fruition, yeah. No, because I agree that he wouldn't. I remember that with Ohio State. Because
I think he'd be perfect at Penn State, man.
Oh,
I think he'd be. And look, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, okay? So if he could go to Penn State and build that up, because I think he can. I'm just picturing him in those colors. I don't know what it is. I think he just fits the colors. I can see him in the Nittany Lion colors, man. And
it would look better than scarlet and gray on him. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it would. It would look better than that scarlet and gray, man. And look, here's the thing. Urban Meyer is a psychopath when it comes to winning. I really don't think do you think he really wants to end his career as his last image is Jacksonville? Like, come on.
I've thought that before too, just because of who he is and how he is. Is that really what he wants to be, that final people remember him by? Right. I agree with you. I don't think he does. And that's why it wouldn't shock me, pick up the phone and make a call that Urban would
make him an offer he can't refuse.
Yes. Yeah, that would be my
offer him 16 to 20 million. Make him turn it down.
Yep, that's mine. I'm making Urban Meyer tell me no before I even call anyone else.
Yeah, and like I said, stay away from Kurt Signetti, okay? Stay away.
If we get Urban, I promise we'll stay away then.
Yeah, no doubt. So how do you think the rest of the season is going to go? How many games do you think you guys are going to win?
I'll be curious because, you just played the 2 easiest games on your schedule outside of your non-con and it didn't go well.
How does Vegas come up with a line on these games going forward?
Like Saturday night's game against Iowa.
Yeah, that's true. You lost as a 24-point favorite, and what was the favorite for how much were you favored by in Northwestern?
22 and a half.
21 and a half, 22, something like that.
Has that ever happened?
No,
not since the FBS FCS split, at least.
Nope.
I was gonna say there's no way that's ever happened. Back-to-back 20-point losses, 20-point favorite losses.
It has not, but yeah, I'll be curious Saturday night against Iowa what the line is on that, and it's also I mean, it's Penn State and Iowa. Their games tend to be ugly and disgusting anyway. So I'll be curious to see. But for the rest of the season, yeah, I don't know, because on one hand, it's like, man, I think this team, after they lost to UCLA, I was of the mindset that whenever they took that third loss, which, I didn't think it'd be against Northwestern. I thought they'd beat Northwestern, probably right the ship enough to beat Iowa, and then take the third loss when they went to Columbus in November, that you would see a lot of guys start to check out, back out of the season, get ready for the draft, whatever it may be. And you've already seen a lot of guys, I feel like, kind of quit on this thing. But with the change, in coaching, that can always be a factor. Who knows if Ethan Grunkemeyer taking over quarterback, what you're going to get. I'm sure they're going to still win a game or two. I'd like to think they can at least get 3 and get the bowl eligibility. But looking at that schedule, it's hard to find them, right?
Well, the problem is there's just nothing to play for.
And that's the thing. It's
before a bowl game would be something you would, players could still strive to be in, but now it's like it's meaningless to be in a bowl game.
Yeah.
In this day and age, like if you're not in the playoffs, what's the point?
Yeah, you brought this team back to make a run at the national championship. Obviously, that's not going to happen now. And I'm with you. I think the lack of having anything to play for is a factor because, unless you want to, and I'm sure a lot of these guys aren't thinking this way. I know when I was their age, not that I was a college athlete, obviously, but I'm sure I would have thought similarly. You can think of it, hey, yeah, I'm looking for, if I'm on this team next year, if I enter the portal, I want to have film, I want to have this, I want to have that to prove myself to a coaching staff. But I'm sure they're not thinking like that. So, again, I'd like to think they can get 3 wins to get to a bowl game still. But looking at that schedule, especially if they don't beat Iowa on Saturday, which Kinnick Stadium at night's never easy, I just don't see a path to 3 wins because, I think they can beat Iowa. If they come out and play to the best of their ability, Iowa, Michigan State, Rutgers, Nebraska are winnable games to me. But I just, again, I like you said, what do they have to play for? They said,
yeah. Let me ask you this, because to me this was pretty baffling. What is wrong with the defense?
I think so. Defensively, against UCLA, they look like a group to me that had quit. They look like a group that had given up, which is always disheartening. I think the biggest issue is kind of twofold. One, the Knowles system can take some time to implement. I remember when he left Ohio State, a lot of Ohio State fans, and at the times it was kind of played off as sour grapes, and maybe they were onto something. Said it usually takes about 2 to 3 years for that system to really get implemented, and pointed out some of the struggles he had his first year as defense coordinator at Ohio State. Also, and this is important in any defense, but especially in Jim Knowles' defense, gap integrity with your defensive tackles is so vital. And the defensive tackle play this year has been very porous. And last year you had Kozai Izzard and Devon Ellies, who were so vastly underrated at defensive tackle, but so good at just that gap responsibility, that gap integrity. Hold your spot, clog up those lanes, free your linebackers up, that sort of stuff. And that's extra important in Knowles' defense because he likes to allow his defensive ends to just go full bore rush up the field and not have to have as much responsibility out there. And they have not been getting good play from the defensive tackles. The linebackers were already thin coming into the year. Was the biggest question mark on defense, and you lose Tony Rojas, who's your best linebacker for the season, to a torn ACL. So it's kind of been a plethora of things, but I think a lot of it starts with just not having good enough defensive tackle play in a defense where strong defensive tackle play is so important.
Hey, do you guys think, if you had to guess, do you think James Franklin takes time off and just enjoys that $50 million he's getting? Or do you think he goes to like a Michigan State or maybe like a Florida or something like that?
I think he'll be coaching next year somewhere. I also think that was part of the calculation on Penn State's end because the way his contract, the way that buyout's written, if he's coaching somewhere else next year, that really that negates a big chunk of what Penn State has to pay him. I forget what the exact number is, but I think he'll be coaching next year somewhere. I really do. I don't think James Franklin wants to be done coaching at all. I just think, you'd reach the spot where it was time for a change at Penn State. It was time. All parties involved needed a fresh start, and that's where we're at. But I think James will be coaching somewhere next year. Rather that's, like you said, a Florida. I know Florida State, when they hired Norvell, tried to make a run at James Franklin then. So I don't know if they make a run at him again. personally, if I'm North Carolina, I would be all over James Franklin. James Franklin probably could do better than North Carolina if he wants. But I think if he's not coaching anywhere in 2026, I think it's because he doesn't want to.
What do you think, Mark?
Well,
Do you think he?
Well, I think based on what he's accomplished at Penn State, his ego, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, everybody has a healthy ego, that he's accomplished so much at Penn State, he's not just going to take any job. Like Virginia Tech's open, I'm going to take Virginia Tech. No, he's better than that. He's accomplished more than that. So I would think it would have to be Florida State. Otherwise, you brought the money aspect into it. Why would he not sit out for a year and wait for the job that he really wants? I think he's in a good position to be able to hear from an administration what he needs to hear at the level of program with the amount of money that he needs and the resources to do what he wants to do. Otherwise, I don't think he needs to be one of these guys that just takes a job just to take a job.
Do you think Florida? I think Florida's a great job, though.
Absolutely.
Do you think it's on that level?
Yes.
I can see him going to Florida because guys, let's be real. They're getting rid of Billy Napier, you would guess, right?
Yeah, I think
Mark,
that's
would
part
you
of the
think
reason
so?
why Penn State moved on from
He's
James
gone.
Franklin now instead of waiting, because they know Florida's going to dump Napier, and they wanted to be able to, get a jump start on Florida with talking to candidates.
Like a couple people are throwing out Arkansas, and I've got a lot of respect for
He ain't
Arkansas.
going Arkansas.
They've had a tremendous football history, but they're just in a bad place. They have no high school football recruit. You're just setting yourself up to look bad going to Arkansas and trying to work through an SEC.
Yeah, he's not going to go to. He's not even going to go to a mid-tier program, guys. He wants to go to a program
That is a
can
mid-tier program.
That's what I'm saying. He's not going to go to. The only programs he's going to consider is one he thinks he could compete for natty.
Absolutely.
Like otherwise, he's not doing it. There's no point. All right, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. Go Blue, Michigan. Penn State has set the example. Please follow through and fire Sharon Moore. I appreciate you guys for showing what should be done.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Good
man.
talking to you.
What do you say, Marty? One more call?
Yeah, I'll take one more with you.
Here we go. We got Joe stopping by. Joe, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going, gentlemen?
We're doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I called in because I was last week I was making the predictions and I had a pretty good week of it. I'm probably not as good as your average, but I did call South Florida to beat North Texas.
Nice.
And I did call USC to beat Michigan. Now that pick might have been just because I want USC to be good next week when Notre Dame plays them. That's going to be a feather in the cap if Notre Dame can win. The only problem is they looked like they could kick Notre Dame's ass today. They just were great.
Yeah, they were. And they were more physical than Michigan. That was a bit of a surprise for me. They completely just rammed the ball down their throats as well. And they had a good pass rush on Bryce Underwood. Yeah, it was a complete butt kicking.
Yeah. Now, were you able to watch that Georgia-Auburn game?
I had it on, but I can't say I was really focused enough to give any great analysis other than Auburn for the second time this year. They have to be the unluckiest team in college football this season. Got completely ripped off by the officials. And not just the officials on the field, the replay booth. How did they fail them?
Yeah, he was over the line. It should have been 17-0 with like a minute and a half left.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, Georgia has no timeouts left at their own one. And with all these timeouts that were given them by these replays and this and that, they're come down to be able to get a field goal to make it 10-3. And it should have been 17-0. And pretty much that's the first half. And it could have been the game over. But I must say, Georgia has always been a very good comeback team. Like, they don't quit. So we don't know what might have happened, but at losing down 17-0 at the half would have been a pretty tall task to ask from them.
Yeah, that was my takeaway from that game as well. And if you looked at statistically, Auburn was just dominating that game. And yeah, I didn't watch the second. Like, again, I was just so wrapped up in the other game, the USC Michigan game.
Yeah.
I've always been able to watch 2 games at the same time, and now I guess I can only watch one because I had that Georgia-Auburn game on start to finish, but I can't tell you much about it other than seeing that Auburn got ripped off on that play.
Yeah. See, what I do is I tape, like this weekend, I probably taped 11 games, and I watch them in order so I don't know the scores, even though there are better games to come up, like for me out here in the West, it's 9 o'clock football starts. So I'm watching those games. Like I taped 3 of them. So I had to watch all 3 before I could move to the 12:30 game, which is 3:30 your time. And so there's another 3 games. So I'm always like, by Sunday, I'm ready to talk about everything that happened,
I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right, Joe.
I can't help it. It's
Anything else?
fun. No, that's about it. I just, I enjoy your show, and I feel a little sorry for Franklin. I think he's a better coach than, what he's shown this year, and he needs a little time off. I think if he takes a 1 or 2 years to get in the booth and do some analysis that way, I think he'd be very good because whenever they talk to him at the halftime, he always seems to have a very good take on what transpired. But does he make adjustments to make, his team win? It's a little different, but I like he gets it. So I wouldn't mind seeing him in the booth. He's a good talker.
Yeah, I agree that he would kill it in media if he wants to go that route instead of, looking for another coaching job. I think he would be tremendous on television. So he's gonna be okay one way or the other. Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate you stopping by.
Okie doke.
Everybody, check out Marty's work. It's the Whiteout Report. Let's get you set up. You can follow Marty on X. You see his X handle right there. And again, the Whiteout Report podcast. And I believe you did mention at the top of the show that you've got a new edition out.
Correct. I was just walking in the front door from my youngest son's 3rd grade game this afternoon whenever the news broke. So we kind of scrambled for about 25 minutes to get our lives together. And then we did an emergency pod. So you can go follow us on Twitter, Whiteout Report Podcast. Follow me. This is Mark Hasler, Marty L_53. You can find us on YouTube as well. Just type in the Whiteout Report Podcast. You'll find us. If you want to go check out the emergency pod we did this afternoon discussing, the firing, we went into pretty deep detail on different candidates that we think would be great match for Penn State. I already mentioned Urban Meyer, but, we talked about a lot more than just Urban Meyer on there. So go check it out and follow along. We do every Wednesday, we do our preview game for the upcoming weekend. Every Saturday, 20 to 30 minutes after the game ends. If not sooner, we do our live recap. And, whenever emergency pods are needed, such as today, we'll have you covered there as well.
Nice. Marty, appreciate you doing this, man.
Absolutely, Mark. I always enjoy it. And hopefully next time I talk to you, it's on better terms for Penn State.
Well, I think they got to hire someone, so I'll be calling then, if not sooner.
All righty. Sounds good. I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Marty. Again, it's Marty Leap, Whiteout Report podcast. And as you can see, we've got Penn State merch at the Voice of College Football. So please check out vocfb.com, vocfb.com. Just keep this in your brain, just like Edward here, the Voice of College Football. There you go. So we do the best that we can with all these other things going on. I know that I've kind of hinted toward this in recent weeks, but, there was a time for years and years and years where this was my baby, start to finish, all day, 100 hours a week. But unfortunately, because of finances, we've had to, we, meaning me, I've had to focus on other business ventures and work. Therefore, I've done my best to maintain the Voice of College Football and deliver as good of content in terms of quantity and quality as possible. vocfb.com. Check it out, the articles, but also check out the merchandise. We've got just about every team covered, at least the major 20 or 25 teams. So the ladies of college football are going right now. So you don't even need to leave the channel. You can stay right here at the Voice of College Football. Just transition to the ladies of college football. They're on right now. So give them your time and attention. Appreciate you being here. And you will see me next Monday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time over on the SG1 Sports Voice of College Football channel. See you Monday night.